Fabulous with Vips and Vicky. The ThinqShift podcast for professionals who aspire to be fabulous leaders. Those who not only succeed, but also purposefully seek to reinvent the world.
In this episode of the Be Fabulous podcast, we'll cover the final of our 4Ds, Seek Discovery, and why it's so key to innovation. We'll talk about the rookie errors that manifest themselves at each stage of the career journey. And last but not least, we'll set the Seek Discovery challenge that makes you reflect on how much you truly seek discovery.
Welcome to our Be Fabulous podcast with Vipson and Vicky. This week we are diving into the fourth D, which is about seeking discovery. And this D is more important than ever in the times that we live in right now. It's about the curiosity needed to get through any situation, no matter what we find ourselves in. In these days, they say that kids in kindergarten, 65% of them will get jobs that have not yet been created. So what that means is they need that creativity and that curiosity to discover new skills because the jobs are just not there. If we think about Uber and Airbnb and the different industries that have been created over the last 15, 20 years, that's changing again. So the need to be curious and creative and create connection has never been more important than it is right now. And seeking discovery is one of the key muscles that are really important to build as part of this. So I'm excited. Vips, how do you feel about this topic?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you nailed it in your intro. The seeking discovery is a reason why we've got it down as one of the 4Ds, and it's one of those things that sounds so obvious, but is notoriously difficult because seeking discovery is hard. So maybe what we should do is you've given a great example of it, particularly in relation to its kind of consequences from a generational point of view. And maybe I should just spend a couple of minutes just explaining what it is. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah. So if you remember, we've done be daring, be deliberate, we've done be dynamic, and now we're in the last of the 4Ds, and that's seeking discovery. And what this is really about is it's very difficult for you to adapt and change how you think about something and benefit from whatever's happening in the world or in the environment around you and adapt quickly if you don't have this insatiable curiosity to discover and learn and understand. And that's really the crux of what seeking discovery is. Many people, when they experience the unknown, the desire is to step away from it. Their desire is this is something to be feared. This is something to be nervous about. I've never done that before. Will I be any good? Will I be bad? Those sorts of things, okay? Whereas fabulous people, who certainly the ones who practice seeking discovery, they kind of hardwired. And again, some of this references kind of some of the ideas from Carol Dweck in mindset. You can almost equate this a little bit to growth mindset. But it's this kind of idea that fabulous people, if they are seeking discovery, well, they don't really experience things going wrong the way mere humans experience things going wrong. They kind of experience it more as, oh, that's interesting. That happened. I wonder what I can learn from it. I wonder what we can do differently. I wonder how we might change. And that sounds really wonderful. And I'm sure many people that will listen to this at some point will be like, oh yeah, I do that, we do that, I do that, we do that. But actually, if you think about it, kind of in the heat of what has become, just the accelerated pace of what's expected of you, being efficient at work, just getting your job done, feeling overworked, not enough hours in the day, feeling like you're on all the time. It's like, you know what? To a certain extent, it's kind of like, screw discovery. I'm struggling hard enough just keeping keeping my stuff together, if you like. And that's really the essence of seeking discovery. So in the sort of the business literature, you hear this often expressed as, we want people who are lifelong learners. We want people who are innately curious. That's the kind of language that gets used, but the intrinsic qualities, the beliefs that one has to have around the relative value of curiosity, even if it means, you get an occasional black eye from your manager or your boss because you've done something that maybe pushed the boat out a little bit too far. Always kind of pushing that boundaries, but calibrating such that it's helpful and effective, but not grueling and destructive. I'm going to pause there, Vicky, and let you react. I'm not sure you've ever heard me say that before.
No, I haven't, Vips. But it's, as usual, it's absolutely spot on. And it makes me go back to our conversation last week where we were talking about kids and their creativity. I think you said that it was 2 years old when kids have, or 2.5 years old when kids have maxed out their creativity. Wasn't it something like that, Vips? We said last week?
Yeah, and I got that from one of my coaches who's actually a head of school. She's very into sort of pedagogy.
There we go.
And the way children learn. So I don't know if that's attributed or not.
Well, yeah.
But however, if you think about it, it's true, right? I mean, that's how kids learn, right? They learn. I'm talking about babies, right? Babies learn by experiencing the world around them the first time.
Yeah, and it's so interesting with kids because kids always ask why.
Yeah.
Why?
It's a nightmare. You don't have kids, Vicky. I tell you, it's a nightmare.
I don't. It's a good thing. It's probably a very good thing, Vips, but and we remember ourselves as kids asking why, and just that insatiable curiosity as to how the world works, and tasting things we shouldn't taste, and touching things we shouldn't touch, and no sense of fear or harm, just curiosity and joy and intrigue. And it's through the conditioning of the institutionalized systems of schooling and other forms of education that we stop asking why. But now the beautiful thing is we all have that muscle in us, in our brain. One part of our brain is dedicated to asking why. And so we have to learn to wake it up again. But when you start just gently even asking, why has this room been painted blue? Why did they choose that color? What does blue mean? What does it evoke? And you start asking those questions even in the situation you're in, your eyes start to open up. And as soon as you start asking those questions, asking why allows you to see things you hadn't yet seen before. And that's all that creativity is. It's not only the traditional sense of being an artist or a musician, but it's actually connecting the dots in new ways that you hadn't seen before. Now, it's not connecting the dots that don't exist, because that's madness. But when you connect them in a way that you hadn't seen before, that's what creativity is. And if you can connect with another human being about these new dots that you see, that's where the opportunity comes in. And that means we don't need to know what the future holds or how it's changing. We simply need to keep being curious and connecting dots in new ways and connecting with others to bring it to life. And that's where the magic comes in. And it can be as simple as, when I drive, Vips, what I love to do is drive a different route to wherever I'm going each time, because I get to see different things. When I go for walks in my neighborhood, I like to walk a slightly different route so I can see that. So,
and if you think about it, that's, at some level, seeking discovery can go against being deliberate, right? Because if you take the same road or same route to work or wherever you go every day, then you don't have to think about it, right? You can operate more on autopilot. So you're saving your brain reserves for something else, right? So even the fact that you do that intentionally is great, yeah? But doing it kind of just for the sake of it without some intentionality behind it can also actually, it can ding you on the deliberate side, if you like. So it's a very interesting balance that you've just described there, I remember, I think it was I was old interview with, in fact, it was Barack Obama when he was president, and he says, I have my routine, my fixed routine, and I always, park in the same place. Always, I'm not sure when he drove as a president, but I know he said that. And the idea being that, if you, the more you can keep on autopilot, the less mental capacity you have available to deal with whatever, whatever is the issue of the day.
Hence the blue suits.
Hence the blue suits. Hence the same clothes. Hence the same.
Yeah.
And you saw that with Steve Jobs as well, right? Same sort of.
Absolutely.
You kind of see that with Elon Musk too. Before we get into
there's a simplicity there.
Yeah. I think what they do is they they find dimensions of their lives they want to be very simple about, if you like, or very repetitive about, in order to unleash that creativity and that sort of visionary power that we think about elsewhere.
That's probably where they're being deliberate with.
Oh yeah.
Because there's no value add to them in being creative around those pieces.
Yeah. You said something else that was really interesting. You talk about connecting dots, and I find this fascinating when I talk about seeking discovery, because it tends to create quite a strong response. So particularly if you're in companies where you have lots of creative people, if you like, and then you have quote unquote project managers. Okay, and what tends to happen is it turns into a rallying cry about how creativity and innovation is more important than getting things done. Okay, and then it kind of gets weaponized. Yeah, and like a lot of these ideas, they can get weaponized really quickly because they talk to something that someone cares about. Like, let's say I'm highly creative and innovation focused. It's very easy for me to justify my creativity and innovation focus at the expense of someone's deliberateness that gives me the space to be creative and innovative, if that makes sense. And we sometimes we kind of forget the symbiosis of all of that. Just as you were speaking, it made me think about that.
Let's talk through a practical example so people can understand a little bit more about what we mean here. Is there one that comes to mind?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm a creative director working on a video for someone. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And that requires a certain amount of inspiration. And I haven't found my mojo yet. So I want space. I want the ability to discover. I want to be outside. I want to be in a place. I know myself well enough to know that when that inspiration hits, I will be able to do it, and it'll be really, really good. Yeah? On the other hand, you'll have your project manager or your client or whoever's paying the bills for you to do that video is like, how far have you got? What's the script? What's the videos looking like? When's it going to be done? How much is it? That kind of thing can feel like it's stifling from a creativity point of view. Right? But also really necessary from the perspective of we got deadlines and we need this piece of creativity, if you will, to be ready. It's a very practical example, yeah?
And it makes me think of even the product development cycle.
Sure.
In ThinqShift. You're a classic example of needing space to be able to create our shift up concepts and having dedicated time. But then being able to fit that in around all the other, the coaching work and the other sessions you're running for our clients. And it's that balance of, there's a deadline we have to hit and we have to have a practice session, get ourselves ready before a shift up segment is launched. But you also need the space. And I think we've described it as distilling whiskey. It has to be the magic ingredients that come together that can't be constrained. It's where the magic happens.
You're totally right. And if you take it out of product and you take it to what often turns into a good CEO-COO relationship, you often see some things are very similar, where particularly as your company gets larger, you tend to find CEOs have to spend a lot more time focusing on what's going on around them, like outside their businesses as opposed to inside their businesses, because you're following market trends. You're looking for where the money and the opportunity is going to be from a business point of view. Yeah. But that's not the same as making sure your processes are working well and the supply chain's working well and all your people are being recruited well and treated fairly and paid. There's what one is going to lend itself more to being deliberate, whereas the other one's going to lend itself a bit more to seeking discovery. But you know, a visionary CEO without the ability to execute is about as good as a hole in the head. I mean, it's not. There's no value in it, and the other way around. So I just think it's a really interesting juxtaposition, and it shows up. It shows up in all areas, really.
So we are teasing out the complexity of the interweaving of these Ds now. Up until now, we've been talking about them as singular components. In this conversation, we're starting to see the paradox of a couple of them and how they play off each other. So being deliberate could have a detrimental impact on seeking discovery and vice versa, unless they're held in balance.
They're all in balance. And that's kind of the reason why I like to do seek discovery last, because it's the one that, here's where else that seek discovery gets abused in the professional world. Everyone likes to think that they're doing quote unquote strategic stuff. And strategic stuff tends to look like whatever someone experiences as bigger picture relative to what they're doing. And that it's quite easy to lose oneself in discovery, if you like, without then coming back to being daring enough to then say something about it, being fluid enough or dynamic enough to see what their company or their organization needs, and then being deliberate enough to actually do the legwork to take that idea and turn it into something that gets implemented. Think about a new process in a company. Think about a new HR process. Everyone and his uncle are going to have to create new blended work policies because so many people are just never going to go back to work in the traditional sense in the offices. Okay, that's something external forced us to seek a lot of discovery, right? But a lot of companies right now are just watching to see, you know, what does Google do? What does Microsoft do? What does, right, pick your company, yeah? And because no one wants to go first and be daring, and so you take your lead from what someone else is doing because it's a safer thing to do, and it kind of gives you kind of safety in numbers, if you like. So it's quite hard. It's very hard to be first if you truly care about seeking discovery and being innovative. It's hard. It's just as opposed to the buzzword of everyone's creative and innovative, because that's sexy right now.
So, Vips, it reminds me of the 90s and early 2000s when companies created innovation teams, sandboxes, R&D labs, and dollars were saved to focus in on that specific problem. And time was allocated. People had 20% of their time to work on innovation, in quotation marks. But it was very hard for them to take those ideas and turn them into something that was executable, that drove business value. And more recently, we're seeing it with hackathons. You know, that's the modern day equivalent of those sandboxes. And everybody has their hackathon and it creates energy once a year or twice a year. But what really happens with those, and do they move the needle for the company, is always questionable because the companies are geared up for efficiency. So as we start our journey from top-notch exec and go back to superstar performer, let's do it the other way around. I'm really curious about your views of, like, how do companies get this right? You know, if you build for efficiency, you're decent size, you're beyond the startups size, like, what do you do with this whole seeking discovery, finding out what the market's doing, staying relevant, being innovative, when your whole mission is to be efficient and scale?
From a company point of view or from an individual point of view at this point?
Let's start company and then do top-notch exec and then awesome manager and superstar. Let's go backwards this time.
Wait, well, the way I look at it from a company standpoint, and this is going to sound, I'm doing this with my company lens on rather than my human lens on. To me, it's actually really, really simple. As long as you're creating ample opportunity to learn, like, just overload people with how much they have to learn. I don't mean learn from the perspective of just straight up throughput, but give them increasing levels of complexity to the work that they have to do. So, and try to not minimize, try to balance how much what I would describe as process-centric task execution with things that require thought and opinion. I think what I see is that when companies do that earlier on, intentionally, it can feel like I'm losing productivity because I'm giving them space to think and work on other stuff. Okay, but what it really does is when those people will stick around a bit longer because they feel like they're learning something which they wouldn't be able to learn somewhere else. And secondly, it accelerates them, or accelerates them out of the superstar performer to also manage a circle of suck. Because what happens is people get comfortable with the idea that, wow, there's so much more to doing a good job and being a good employee than just my little chunk of the universe. So the way I look at it is, if companies could and should do a better job of identifying, what we would call the fabulous talent earlier on, and almost forcing that scope of breadth earlier on as well, because and see it like investment instead of consumption. Whereas if we think of just consumption, then that's like the tasks you have to do to get your job done. Investment's always the things that maybe might give you 5% less consumption this week, but is going to give you 10% productivity a year from now.
Well, in engineering terms, we can think of that as technical debt, drawing down the technical debt so that you are ultimately creating the space for the systems to run better in the future.
Yeah, I think the actual to be honest, what I see, and I don't know if you see this, Vicky, with your clients, but what I see is at the very senior levels, they get this. That's not the problem. The problem really is that we've just got very good as corporate America, really, and to a certain extent Britain too. The two countries I know a lot about, where we just got comfortable giving manager responsibilities to people that don't know how to manage. So the problem's happening kind of lower down the food chain. So if you don't really want or know what it means to manage human beings as opposed to manage for task execution, then what actually happens is that balance doesn't exist. So the phrase that I use a lot is, you sweat the resource. So people start feeling like they're cogs in a machine being sweated. And that's kind of why, top talent moves away, because they can. And kind of, companies get left with the dregs.
And even the word resource isn't very appealing when you're a human being.
Yeah,
it should be people management, not resource management.
Yeah, it's kind of it's
one of our bugbears.
The oxymoron of HR. What can I say? But I think to bring it back to some real, from a company's point of view, here's the issue. We know that the only way that our companies are going to be innovative against an increasingly competitive world landscape, right? Things are changing fast. Okay, I guarantee that in the way that we talk about Google, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook today, there's going to be 3 or 4 new companies that are at that level 6, 7, 8, 10 years from now. Now, whether they emerge from the world of Uber or whether they emerge from medical tech and in the post-pandemic world, or I don't know where they're going to emerge from, but I promise you they will emerge. So what it tells you is the economic returns for having sufficient people in your company being sufficiently creative rather than just expecting process and 1 or 2 people to do that is gonna create really huge returns, because the only way we can win competitively as an economy, as a national economy, is by creating more innovation-centric jobs. And you can't create more innovation-centric jobs if you with just dreamers. You can't have just dreamers. You have to have people who can execute too. But you need those people who are going to be able to create the jobs in creative ways, because that's where the income's going to be. And, as we know, the gap between the haves and the have-nots is only getting wider. So, to me, there's a very systemic reason why we have to cultivate these qualities in the current 20 to 30-year-olds, because, quite frankly, they need to do a better job of marshalling the US business economy than maybe the current generation of leaders have been able to do.
So let's bring that down to top-notch execs. What does that mean for top-notch execs, and what are some of the rookie errors that they should be avoiding?
That's a good question. I think, to me, the biggest difference, the biggest challenge I see with top-notch executives. So let's take the category of top-notch executives that maybe aren't so fabulous. So I think what happens is it becomes risky to seek discovery. Yeah, think about it. If you've been an executive in a large organization for an extended period of time, doing anything new equals taking risk. Yeah, and especially if you're at that senior executive, but not quite made it yet, right? Then you have a lot to lose by screwing up your job today. You've got lovely income. You're going to have relatively pleasant existence. No one's really questioning what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Why bring that kind of entropy into your world? So I think the rookie era happens where executives start feeling like they're not replaceable because of the size of their empires.
Yeah, we see that a lot, Vips.
And so that's the big rookie error that comes about from not seeking discoveries. People don't realize, those executives don't realize that if I don't innovate and try new things, then what's really going to happen is even if the environment is too chicken to do something about me, which many environments are, what'll actually happen is the entire department will go away in an organizational transformation, or someone even more senior comes in for an 18-month to 2-year period to clean house, and you kind of get caught in the backwash. And this is the sad thing, a lot of executives actually want that to happen because they just want their nice big severances, and they have enough belief that they can game the system and get a job somewhere else for similar money, which sadly, while the economy was overheating, that was possible. But I think you're going to see a very different story from this point forward, because at least for the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to have it's going to be a buyer's market for executives rather than a seller's market for executives.
Now there is hope, because you do get those truly transformational executives who are always, the fabulous few who are always playing to win, and they're not playing out just for their salary. And so for those of you that are struggling with this conundrum, I've always thought it very helpful during that stage to have an interim executive for a period of time to do the transformation, because the guys who transform and the guys who run tend to be motivated by very, very different things, and they're not always the same person. And when I say guys, I mean guys and girls, naturally.
You bring up a really interesting point, because you're absolutely right. The people who want to transform things tend not to be the ones who want to operate them afterwards.
It's boring.
It's boring. And so that's true for leaders, but it's also true for, if you think about it, how have we done that in businesses? We've done that typically. You get the consultants to come in. We've been consultants our lives. We can say this about ourselves. You get the consultants to come in to do a transformation, then we kind of cause disruption, mayhem, screw things up from the perspective of someone who wants things to stay the same. We screw things up. We make a bunch of changes, implement a bunch of systems and what have you, that from their point of view haven't been thought well through, but we're forcing through the change, if you like. And then we get sent off because we're too expensive to keep around. And what happened is the hearts and minds and the mindset never really changed, and you never changed the leaders to go with it. So what happens is you get reversion. Yeah. And you either get reversion where everything that you did just gets washed away, yeah, or you get the reversion that looks like, well, what they were doing was good, but it was very badly done or very badly built, or, hanging together by, strings and toilet roll. We have to now do it properly, okay? And then they have to do the projects all over again. And so our own industry really has not been very helpful in this perspective.
Well, there's a third way, which is you get it far enough where it's got enough sticking power, and you've spent the political capital and that messiness to make it happen, and then somebody can tweak it and take it forward. And that means when it's really, really rewarding. But it does require a certain amount of leadership and organizational willingness to push through to that point, of that tipping point, where it's then tweaks and maneuvers as opposed to wholesale change.
Vicky, you bring up a really interesting point that I was talking to another client of mine last week about. And to me, I think this is where I think HR has a real role to play from a compensation point of view. Meaning, don't lock in transformational people to long-term incentives, right? And it happens all the time.
That's the rookie mistake.
That is definitely a rookie mistake. And it happens all the time. And you know why? I think it's because transformational people, they project a perception of value that's greater than reality. They tend to be charismatic. They tend to be high energy. They tend to be able to inspire on the surface, but very few actually
Have the staying power.
Have the staying power. Yeah. The
Yeah.
fabulous few do, but most of them don't. And so
Well,
don't lock them in.
It's back to the fourth non-negotiables, having the values and ethics in line with the environment. You have to want that change to stick beyond your own personal needs, because it's really, really hard, and it's easy to get worn down.
Yeah. And I think I think what people don't realize also is if you're doing something innovative or transformational in intent, and for the right reasons, you truly believe it's right. The reality is, particularly in large organizations, you're going to be running against the inertia of the company. And the problem with that is it's like death of a thousand cuts. You can take one, you can take two, so what's going to happen is over time, you're going to build up a lot of enemies. So when it comes to review time and performance evaluation time, like the way we do performance management, reach out to 20 people, ask your team how you're doing, that kind of stuff. What's going to happen is people are going to have stored up that ammunition. And those 1,000 paper cuts are going to come back at you in your reviews, right? And we call that, open and transparent feedback. And there's a point at which, well, if you're on a transformation agenda, then you have to have the sophistication as a boss or as a performance management system to say, well, I'm expecting 60, 70% of the feedback to come back for this person to be, spiky or swipey because
they're being disruptive.
Because they're being disruptive, which is what you paid them for when you got them on board. So we have this kind of oxymoron where we tend to say we want that, then we lock them in so they can't leave by paying them too much money or locking them into 4 or 5 year incentive programs, right? Share options or whatever, okay? And then on the other hand, we want to bitch and complain about them because they are upsetting people. And it is a little bit of, you can't have it both ways. And I think that's what I think it gets washed away with people who are responsible for performance management systems see that as, but the CEO won't take action on this, or, we see this problem, but no one else sees it. It's easy to diminish its necessariness, if you will.
Yeah. So our takeaways for the top-notch exec is decide what kind of executive you are. Are you someone who is playing it safe and is prepared to not seek discovery or have minute perspectives around it? Or are you someone who's truly transformational and are going to drive forward that agenda and use up that political capital, know that it's going to be spiky? And either way, it's not easy.
Well, and also don't pretend to be
transformational.
If you're not, and don't pretend to be operational if you're transformational. You're just buying yourself a world of pain.
Okay, so let's think about the awesome manager, Vips. What happens there?
Okay, awesome manager. So to me, this is where it gets really interesting, because I think this is where you really want to see that stage of the journey. That's really where you want to see a lot more seeking of discovery, because what's going to happen is these are the people that are sufficiently close to, if you like, the front lines of the people who are doing the work. And they're not that far removed from it yet, if you will. But this is going to be where all incremental innovation and growth occurs. It's going to be easy for awesome managers to just follow processes, right? In which case nothing evolves and nothing improves, okay? On the other hand, they're probably closest to pragmatic, practical solutions for incremental improvement, okay? Their problem normally comes from, I don't know if it's my responsibility to. I'm not sure if my boss will support me. If this goes wrong, I might not get my promotion or pay rise. That's where that one goes. So what I think is on the awesome manager one, it tends to be going back to one of our 4 non-negotiables. It tends to be more about our inside-out mentality and our self-confidence that gets in the way of our seek discovery ideas. The ideas are there, but you kind of keep a lid on them, or you don't have the political sophistication to be able to handle the subtlety of navigating that, and you kind of take a bull in a china shop, or let me just give you 16 charts while what I'm saying is correct, or let me blow you away with data, or let me blow you away with emotion. And it's more the great communicator and the inside out mentality aspect of it that gets in the way of the innovation and discovery at the awesome manager level.
Yeah, if they don't have that. You're right, Vips, because when you were a superstar performer, you were very good at getting the tasks done. But as a manager, if you're trying to get buy-in to a particular agenda that you have around innovation, it's really important to be able to have a range of different ways of influencing to be able to get that done.
Which if you hadn't invested the time to build those communication influencing skills when you're a superstar performer, then it's kind of like coming to a gunfight with a knife, which is what most of our managers do, right? And it becomes a really hard slog then to win at that point, you know? I tell you where that comes out an awful lot is also because what I say to a lot of people, I work with a number of people who are genuinely very creative, very, 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 very creative, artistic, visual, very classically creative, as opposed to, process creative or technical solution creative, if you like, right? And what I often find is where they fall over is not so much in the spark of genius, if you like, that they have. It's their inability to communicate that to mere humans. And so it's very easy to preach to the choir that people that agree with you already, but they're not the ones you need. They're not, that's not, they don't know how to make it relevant for a CFO. They don't know how to make it relevant for a intern. They don't know how to make it relevant for, a customer who's got serious supply chain issues. And so what happens is the whole language set around what constitutes creating business value actually ends up showing how little they understand business value. And it's so pervasive, because kind of everyone sees value through the lens of their competence as opposed to a business equation.
And that's where spending time building relationships becomes so important, because the more you do that, the more you are winning friends and influencing. And when your idea needs to come to fruition, you can do the breadcrumbing and you can know who's on your side and how to tune your messages. And without that, you're going in cold. And that's a great one to be learning at the manager level.
Hey, I'll tell you something really practical, a really practical tip I am, as opposed to a conceptual one. I think everyone should make friends. Like you talk about business relationships. I mean, like take it a little bit beyond, with a lawyer, with an accountant. No, seriously, with a lawyer, with an accountant, with a technologist, and a salesperson, like a software developer and a salesperson. Because I think if you actively choose to make those people your friends, right, then you're going to develop a vocabulary set that allows you to converse with that. But two, you also learn to appreciate stuff that you think doesn't matter or maybe is less relevant depending on which set you're coming from. It's a very powerful thing to do.
But you have to do it more than just talking about the weather or sports. You have to be truly interested in what they do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, Vips, we're going to have all these friends, but no real value from it.
Yeah, you can't. I'm not talking about, friends that I want to hang out with only. I'm talking about being sufficiently willing to seek discovery about understanding the complexities and the realities of the world that they live in. Because without that, you really can't create systemic solutions to anything.
That's a good one.
Because if you think about it, without money, there's not much you can do. Without a good idea, there's not much you can do. Without the ability to execute, there's not much you can do. And without people being inspired by it, there's not much you can do. So having one of those four is kind of pointless. It's about as good as a wet shoe.
All right, people, your call to action. Go make some friends with accountants and lawyers and marketers and technologists. Okay, so what about the superstar performer?
Superstar performer. I think this is where probably I think you want to learn as much as you possibly can. You probably do have a lot more ideas, but it feels like you're being stopped from above. This is like I think this is, you see this a lot, particularly sort of junior levels, as part of that superstar performer journey, the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years of your career, where you seem to have all the ideas in the world, but the environment around you is telling you in some way, shape, or form that that's not going to work. You're not ready yet. You're being too immature about your thoughts or whatever. Okay, and I think that to me, that's when it shows up most. And so what I always tell folks in that sort of superstar performer stage is that what that looks like is always going 1 degree beyond what was needed or asked for. So it goes back to how you started, Vicky, which was going for the why. Okay? Don't just do something because your boss tells you to do. At least ask the first level of, why are we doing this so that I can do a better product or a better deliverable or a better project or a better, being inquisitive enough to understand the why is probably the most important thing to do there.
And tone is so important. So the way Vip said that, it was very curious and light rather than sounding like you're interrogating. That's very important.
Yeah. Why are we doing that? Yeah, that's not going to work.
As opposed to why? Why is this of importance? Curiosity, gentle tone.
Yeah, or even it would really help me to understand a bit more about why we're going down this road, because I feel I could do this many ways, and I'm not sure what the best way would do unless I kind of understand why we're trying to do this and what the urgency is. That's very different than, why do we have to do this and get it done by next Friday? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And I think what you find is folks who, particularly at the early stage of one's career, they tend to associate doing a good job as getting their tasks done. And so they kind of forget that getting your task done in a way that pisses people off is worse than not getting the task done at all. And it's easy for people to do that because they disproportionately associate value with their task.
Okay. So it feels like, unless you have any final thoughts, we should share the Seek Discovery Challenge.
No, but I'm totally up for the Seek Discovery Challenge. I hope you've thought of it.
I have.
That's good.
So if we are going to seek discovery this week, what you need to do is ask yourself, as Vips just said, when you be given a task, ask yourself, why am I doing this task? And if you get brave enough, ask the person around you, why am I doing this task? And use the language that Vips recommended, which is all about, it would really help me to understand the outcome if you could explain a little bit more about the context behind what we're doing and why we need to do it. So that's the first thing. If you're given a task, ask why. Secondly, when you're thinking about the environment you're in right now, rather than just accepting it for the way it is, start to ask yourself 5 levels of why. Go deeper. Why is this happening? You'll have your first answer. But what's behind that? You'll have your next answer. Go deeper. Ask yourself 5 whys to see if you can get to the root cause systemically of what's really going on. And then the third challenge, for those of you that are up for this one, in your personal relationships, when something triggers you, that's your work. And rather than being triggered by it, ask yourself, seek discovery. Who would I be if this thought didn't trigger me? How would I live my life if I wasn't triggered by this thought? What work do I need to do to not be triggered by this thought? And there's our challenge. So we've got 3 levels. You get to play at 1 or 3 levels. Level 1 is when you've been asked to do something, get curious and see if you can do it in a way that is light and lands well to find out why it needs to get done. Second level is in the environment around us right now. Ask the 5 whys to systemically figure out what the hell's going on, much deeper than you superficially see. And thirdly, in your relationships, when you get triggered, and triggers are where our work is, who would you be without those thoughts? How would your life be if they didn't affect you?
So, Vicky, I have a little test that I remembered as you were doing the challenge. And I do this sometimes when I'm facilitating groups. And you talked about the 5 whys challenge. Well, a really good test to see your own personal score of how well you do from a seek discovery point of view in the way we talk about it, in terms of how hardwired are you to seek discovery. As you're asking yourself the 5 whys and things are getting basically broader And because what's going to happen, the more you add the whys, the harder the problem is going to be, right? It's going to be more complex. There's going to be more entropy in the conversation. As you're doing that, if you find yourself saying, "This is just too hard. I can't think of that. It's getting way out of my depth. I can't think of that. Forget that. I'll just bury my head in the sand and hope it goes away," right? If you find yourself saying stuff like that after the first why, then you have very, very low levels of seeking discovery. If you find yourself doing that after the second level, you're getting better, right? By the third level, that's normally where most people top out, yeah? And most people don't really want to go beyond level 3 because it starts getting uncomfortable. Because when you get to level 4 and level 5, you're going to probably find that you're part of the problem in some way, shape, or form. Yeah? And that's what we don't like, right? We don't like being part of the problem, whatever problem we're looking at. And so we tend to avoid stages 4 and 5 because the only way to really solve some of that is by doing something different ourselves. And we don't really like doing something different. We love change so long as it happens to someone else. And that's, and that's why it's a 4D for a fabulous person.
Well, Vibs, that sets us up beautifully for next week's topic on the 5 thinking levels. We're going to dive right into that.
Sounds wonderful.
Okay, guys, so this was Seek Discovery, the last of the 4Ds, and hopefully you've got a lot out of our discussion and why they are important. And we look forward to seeing you next week on thinking levels. Any final comments, Vibs?
All good. Let's see everyone next week. Everyone be fabulous.
Have a great week and be fabulous.